My grandmother, Eleanor, was a hoarder of the most peculiar kind. She didn't collect newspapers or cats or ceramic knickknacks. Her vice was memory. Her sprawling two-story Victorian house was a museum dedicated to a life no one else remembered. A labyrinth of steamer trunks, sealed boxes, and furniture shrouded in dusty white sheets. When she passed away peacefully in her sleep at 94, the monumental task of clearing out that mausoleum fell to me, her only grandson. I spent the first week in a haze of dust motes and the cloying scent of decayed lavender and old wood. It was on the 8th day, armed with a powerful LED flashlight and a resolve forged from cheap coffee, that I decided to tackle the attic. The pull-cord ladder groaned in protest, a sound of rusted springs and aged timber. The air that wafted down was frigid and still, carrying a scent I can only describe as stale electricity and forgotten birthdays. The attic was a black mouth, and my flashlight beam felt like a feeble tongue trying to probe its depths. It was even worse than I'd imagined. A forest of covered furniture became monstrous shapes in the periphery. Boxes were stacked to the slanted ceiling, their contents long since fused into amorphous lumps by time and moisture. And in the farthest, darkest corner, tucked under the eaves where the roof met the floor, was an old sea chest I'd never seen before. It was made of dark, oiled wood, banded with tarnished brass. It wasn't locked. With a sense of reverence that felt both earned and foolish, I lifted the heavy lid. Inside, nestled in custom-fitted velvet compartments, were 6 film reels. They were the old metal kind, with cores of aged wood. Each was labelled with a small brass plate screwed into the casing. My heart did a little stutter. I'm a filmmaker, or at least I'm trying to be. The digital age is my playground, but I've always had a romantic fascination with the analog, the tactile nature of physical film. Finding these was like uncovering a pirate's treasure. I lifted them out one by one, reading the labels in the beam of my light. The dates placed my grandmother in her late 20s and early 30s. My father would have been a young boy. The 6th reel, the last reel, sent a minor chill down my spine. The finality of it. Why was it the last? I assumed they'd just gotten a new camera, a new format. I packed them carefully into a sturdy box, my filmmaker's excitement overriding the attic's pervasive sense of dread. I had to see what was on them. Back at my apartment, which was a cluttered mess of camera gear, half-empty coffee mugs, and storyboards, I felt a surge of giddy anticipation. I'd invested in a Steenbeck flatbed editing machine a few years back, a beautiful, if bulky, relic. It was perfect for viewing these. I decided to start at the beginning. Family Picnic, Ash Creek, 1954. The film was 16mm, and it felt brittle in my hands. I threaded it carefully through the Steenbeck's gate, the mechanical clicks and whirs a comforting, familiar sound. The screen flickered to life, a monochrome world bleeding into existence. The footage was normal, almost aggressively so. A younger, vibrant version of my grandmother laughed, her head thrown back as she spread a checkered blanket on the grass. A man I recognized as my grandfather, James, looking dashing in a loose-fitting shirt, chased a toddler, my father, around a large oak tree. The sun was bright, the grass looked lush. It was a perfect idyllic scene. The film had the usual scratches and jumps of home movies from that era, but it was charming. Then I noticed the man in the background. In the deep shade of the woods, just at the edge of the frame, stood a figure. He was tall and impossibly thin. Dressed in a dark, formal suit, that seemed to absorb the light. His posture was wrong. His shoulders slumped at an angle that suggested broken bones. But it was his face that made my breath catch, or the lack thereof. Where his face should have been, there was only a smooth, pale expanse, like polished bone or tight stretched skin. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. I stopped the machine, my heart hammering. I rewound the film, frame by frame. There he was. He hadn't been there a second before, and in the next few frames, as my father ran past the tree, he was gone. He was just standing, watching. A flaw in the film, I muttered to the empty apartment. A chemical bloom, a strange shadow. Pareidolia, I was seeing a pattern where none existed. I convinced myself to continue. Robert's 5th birthday, 1956. The scene was a familiar living room, strung with paper banners. My father, Robert, blew out candles on a cake. Children clapped. And there, in the reflection of a glass-fronted cabinet behind the festivities, was the tall man. His faceless head was turned towards the party. He was inside the house. My throat went dry. This was no coincidence. This was a pattern. Summer holiday, 1958. A beach. My grandmother in a modest swimsuit. My grandfather building a sandcastle with my father. The tall man was closer now, standing knee-deep in the water 50 yards out. The waves didn't seem to touch him. His suit wasn't wet. He was a stark, black cutout against the shimmering silver of the sea. A cold knot of dread was tightening in my stomach. This wasn't just a creepy figure. He was getting nearer. Reel by reel, he was closing the distance. The new house, 1961. This was the Victorian house I had just cleaned out. The footage showed them moving in, and there he was, the tall man, standing in the attic window, the very attic I had been in just days before. His smooth, blank face was pressed against the glass. He wasn't just in the background anymore. He was in their home. I was sweating now, the room feeling claustrophobic. The cheerful, tinny music of the home movies, the laughter. It all felt like a grotesque lie, a pleasant veneer over something festering and vile. I loaded the 5th reel with trembling hands. A Day at the Lake, 1962. The footage was different from the start. Jittery, poorly framed, as if the person holding the camera, my grandfather, I assumed, was nervous. The family was on a small wooden dock. My grandmother was trying to smile, but it was strained. My father, older now, was looking off camera, his expression uneasy. The tall man was no longer in the background. He was standing at the end of the dock. He was so close that his form took up a quarter of the frame. You could see the fine weave of his suit, the unnatural smoothness of his skin. He was perfectly still. Then, the camera panned away, shakily, to my grandfather's feet. When it panned back, the tall man was gone. But the dock wasn't empty. Lying on the weathered wood planks was a small, dark object. The camera zoomed in clumsily. It was a dead crow, its neck twisted at an impossible angle, its beak open in a silent scream. The film ended abruptly. I sat in the humming silence of my apartment. The image of the dead bird burned onto my retinas. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely light a cigarette. This was more than a creepy home movie. This was a record of a haunting, a stalking. What the hell was this thing? And why was it in my family's films? There was only one reel left, the last reel, 1963. I stared at the innocuous metal spool. It seemed to radiate a malevolent energy. This was it, the finale. Whatever happened in 1963 had caused them to stop filming, to lock these reels away in a chest and never speak of them again. My grandfather had died of a sudden, massive heart attack in the spring of 1964. The official story had always been that it was stress-related. Now, I wasn't so sure. I had to know. The need to understand was a physical ache, a compulsion that overrode every screaming survival instinct. I threaded the final reel. The film began without titles. It was the living room of the Victorian house at night. The only light came from a single standard lamp, casting long dancing shadows. The camera was set up on a tripod, its eye unblinking. My grandfather, James, sat in his armchair. He looked decades older than in the previous reel. His face was haggard, his eyes sunken and dark. He was staring directly into the lens. He began to speak. There was no sound on the film, of course, but I could read his lips. He was a meticulous man, and he formed his words with painful clarity. "If you are watching this," he mouthed, "then you have found the chest. I am sorry. We thought we could contain it. We called it the Spectator." A cold finger traced its way down my spine. The Spectator. It is attracted to the act of observation, to recording, to memory made physical. The camera. The camera is an eye it can see through, a door it can step through. We didn't know. We thought we were capturing happy moments. The film flickered. A shadow passed in front of the camera. But James didn't flinch. He just kept speaking, his face a mask of despair. It feeds on fear. Not the sharp, sudden terror, but the slow, gnawing dread. The kind that grows in the dark, in the corners of your vision. It started in the films, but then it started to stay. We would see it in the hallways, in the mirrors, just for a second. It's learning, getting stronger. He leaned forward, his face filling the frame. His eyes were wide, pleading. It wants a story, a narrative. Our lives were its narrative. The picnic, the birthday, the holiday. It was all a prologue for it. It was setting the stage. And now it's coming for the finale. It wants an ending. He looked over his shoulder into the dark hallway. He was terrified. It's here now. In the house. Eleanor and Robert are upstairs. I've locked the door. I have to finish this. I have to give it what it wants. An ending. He stood up, his movements slow and heavy, like a man going to the gallows. He walked towards the camera. For a moment, his body blocked the lens. When he moved away, he was holding something. A rope. He walked to the center of the room, directly beneath the main ceiling light. He threw the rope over a heavy beam. I wanted to look away. I wanted to vomit. But I was paralyzed, my eyes glued to the screen. He fashioned a noose. He placed it around his neck. He wasn't crying. His expression was one of grim, horrifying resignation. This was a ritual, a sacrifice. He looked back at the camera one last time. It is not in the film. The film is in it. Do not watch, do not record. Do not give it a new story. Then he kicked the chair away. The film didn't cut. It kept rolling. The body of my grandfather swung slowly, a grotesque pendulum in the dim light. The shadows in the room seemed to deepen, to congeal. And then, from the darkness of the hallway, the tall man emerged. He moved into the frame, his gait fluid and silent. He stopped beside the swinging body. He didn't look at it. His smooth, blank face was turned towards the camera, towards me. He raised one long, pale hand and pointed a single, bony finger directly at the lens. The film went black. I jerked back from the Steenbeck as if electrocuted. The reel had run out. The apartment was silent except for the frantic thumping of my own heart. I was drenched in a cold sweat. I couldn't process what I had just seen. My grandfather hadn't died of a heart attack. He had hanged himself as an offering to this spectator, to save his family, to give the story an ending. I stumbled away from the machine, my mind reeling. I needed air. I needed to get out. I fumbled for my keys, for my jacket, my only thought to flee the claustrophobic horror of my own home. That's when I saw it. On my laptop, which I'd left open on the coffee table, the screen had gone to sleep. In the black reflective surface, for just a fraction of a second, I saw the reflection of the room behind me. And standing right behind my chair, his tall, thin form bent under the ceiling, was the tall man. His faceless head was tilted, as if observing me, as if waiting. I spun around. A scream caught in my throat. There was nothing there, but the air was cold, colder than it should have been. And a smell, that same smell from the attic, stale electricity and something else, something metallic, like old blood, hung in the air. I didn't leave the apartment. I was too terrified to move. I spent the night with every light on, huddled on my sofa, jumping at every creak and groan of the old building. The box containing the film reel sat by the door, and I could feel its presence like a tumor. I had watched them. I had given it a new story. My story. The next few days were a blur of sleep-deprived paranoia. I saw him everywhere. A tall, dark shape in a crowd that vanished when I blinked. A flicker of movement in a window reflection. I stopped using my cameras. I covered the mirrors in my apartment. I was living in a state of constant, low-grade terror. The exact kind of dread my grandfather had described. It was feeding. Last night, I broke. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to destroy the reels. I would burn them, melt them into slag, and break the curse. I gathered them up, my hands shaking, and carried them to the sink. I doused them with lighter fluid. As I held my lighter, my thumb poised to strike, a thought, cold and insidious, slithered into my mind. What if destroying them doesn't release it? What if it just lets it out? The lighter fell from my numb fingers. I was sobbing, defeated. I gathered the reels and put them back in the chest. I carried it down to my car and drove back to my grandmother's house, which was now empty, waiting to be sold. The house was a black silhouette against a moonless sky. I used my key and stepped inside, the silence absolute and heavy. I didn't turn on the lights. I carried the chest through the dark, familiar rooms, up the stairs, and pulled down the attic ladder. The air in the attic was colder than before. It was a physical presence, a freezing weight. I shoved the chest back into its corner under the eaves, my breath pluming in the air. I just wanted to be rid of it, to put the horror back in its box. As I turned to leave, my flashlight beam swept across the far wall, and I froze. There, on the dusty, unfinished drywall, were words scratched into the surface. They weren't there before. I would have seen them. The writing was jagged, frantic, as if carved with a frantic, terrified finger. It likes your eyes. A sound made me whirl around. A soft, rhythmic click, click, click. It was coming from the center of the attic. My flashlight beam trembled as I pointed it. There, on the floor, stood my Steenbeck editing machine. It was impossible. I had left it in my apartment, but it was here. And on it was threaded a new reel, one I had never seen before. It was a fresh, modern reel of digital film, transferred to 16mm. The machine was running, the take-up reel slowly turning. Click, click, click. I don't know what compelled me to do it. Maybe it was the same morbid curiosity that made me watch the first reel. Maybe it was the spectator guiding me, offering me my role in the new narrative. I walked towards the machine, my legs moving like blocks of wood. I leaned down and looked into the viewing screen. The footage was grainy, monochrome, but unmistakable. It was my apartment. The camera was positioned high in a corner, looking down. There I was, asleep on my sofa, just a few nights ago. The footage had the same quality as the old films, but the subject was modern. It was me. The scene changed. It was me in my kitchen, making coffee, my face drawn and tired. Another cut. Me, staring out the window, a look of profound fear on my face. This was footage from the last week. It was documenting my descent into terror. The spectator wasn't just in the old films anymore. It was making new ones. The film on the Steinbeck cut to a new scene. It was this attic, right now. The shot was from the same high angle. And there I was, in the film, leaning over the Steinbeck, watching myself watch myself in an infinite, horrifying recursion. In the footage, I looked up from the screen, my face a mask of utter horror. And in the real world, I did the same. I looked up, following the angle of the phantom camera, and I saw him. The tall man was standing directly in front of me, so close I could see the faint, poreless texture of his skin. His suit was immaculate. He smelled of ozone and dust. He was holding something. A small, old-fashioned brownie camera. He raised it, pointing it at my face. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I tried to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. He didn't have a face, but I felt him smile. Then, he reached out with his other hand. His fingers were long, cold, and hard as bone. He didn't touch my skin. He moved slowly, deliberately, towards my eyes. This is not a story I am writing for fun. This is a warning, scrawled in the desperate hope that someone will find it. I am trapped here, in this house. The doors won't open. The windows are locked, or something is holding them shut from the outside. The Steinbeck is still running. The click, 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 a metronome counting down the last moments of my sanity. He has finished his new film. I have seen it. It's my story, my narrative of fear, and it needs an ending. He is in the room with me now. He's setting up the tripod. The camera is loaded. He has given me a pen and paper. He wants me to write this down, to make the record complete. He's a patient director. He knows how the story ends. He is waiting for me to write the final line. So here it is. I can see the red light on the camera is on. It's recording. He's standing behind it, his blank face turned towards me. He's raising his hand. He's pointing at me. It's my turn to perform.